Before this video begins, I would like to give viewer discretion that this video will discuss very tragic events in history, including ethnic cleansing, state-imposed famine, xenophobia, cultural genocide, linguicide, and other sensitive information. You have been warned. Wikipedia is known as the Internet Free Encyclopedia, and it has a long history, believe it or not. Although many people don't believe Wikipedia is a reliable source of information, especially on lesser known topics, such as Seoul Nagoyle, in which it mixes the first and second incarnations of the organization and frames it as the modern organization, which has significantly damaged the organization's reputation. It overall has gotten better at tackling misinformation and is now even being welcomed into schools globally. Wikipedia has pushed well above its weight, as it has almost 7 million articles on the English translation alone, and has over 300 languages that it supports, one of which is the Scots language spoken in the northeast, southern uplands, as well as Orkney and Shetland Islands of Scotland, along with Ulster Scots in the Ulster province of Ireland. Scots has been culturally significant to not just Scotland and Europe, but to the world as a whole. For example, the New Year's song, aka Auld Lang Syne, originates from the Scots language and was written by Scotland's national poet Robert Burns. Another fact that is not well known is the pirate stereotype, where words like I, we, and blether, etc. all originate from Scots. Scots is often considered the second closest language to English, with number one being Frisian, which has resulted in Scots having a pretty dark history in terms of suppression, but we will get into that later. Back to Wikipedia. The Scots Wikipedia for years was the main source of information on the Scots language, and often seen as the safe space for Scots speakers. It was the most visible and internationally trusted digital platform that represented Scots as a language. The Scots Wikipedia has existed since 2005. However, many Scots speakers themselves didn't even like it for many reasons. The main reason is that a lot of editors weren't Scots speakers, nor were they even from Scotland. A lot of the articles on the Wikipedia page for Scots has many grammatical errors, to gibberish, to even confusing Scots with Gaelic, which is another language of Scotland but is different to Scots. This is where the controversy comes in. A Reddit post written by Yultach highlighted in August 2020 that a significant amount of articles on the Scots Wikipedia have been edited by one specific user, an American teenager who did not know the language. Estimates shown that around 20,000 to 27,000 articles were written by this teenager, which was about a third to a half of all Scots articles. Furthermore, there was about 200,000 edits by this particular user, which at the same time was a little under 100 edits per day. The account was made in 2013, wanting to make seemingly as much contributions to Wikipedia as a whole as possible. The issue was that the teenager seemed to copy the English versions of these articles and attempted to translate each word one by one using an unreliable English to Scots dictionary, and at times just wrote English words in a phonetic Scottish accent. The reason why he didn't use a known translator like Google Translate is because, unfortunately, Google Translate hasn't actually created a translator for Scots, for reasons we'll get onto later, as to why many Scottish people, this was not just some teenager having dumb fun online. Scots grammar is actually very different to English. There are many words in Scots that sound almost identical to English words, but have completely different meanings, such as the word cry, which means to call in Scots, and greet means to cry in English. The teenager completely ignored Scots grammar and left entire paragraphs in English too. Another notable thing is that Scots is a unique language, as a significant portion of words in Scots do not have a translation in English, especially words used to describe something, and entire words change depending on context, so even if the teenager used a reliable dictionary, their articles would still be grammatically wrong. Not long after this was discovered, many mainstream news networks hopped onto the story, with some taking advantage of the situation to call Scots as a pretend language, as a result of how gibberish and inconsistent the teenagers' grammars were. Not only that, but the Scots Wikipedia had to be locked to prevent any trolling attempts. Now, here is why this wasn't any ordinary controversy and the Scots language's dark past. Because the Scots Language Wikipedia was the only mainstream Scots website out there, this was really the only way for Scots speakers to feel comfortable with native language online. So the articles that were plain gibberish by this American teenager made the language look like it isn't real, a mere dialect of English. But that term I just said there, a dialect of English, is more damaging than you may think. Ever since 1707, in which Scotland lost sovereignty to London, in what is often misunderstood as a voluntary agreement, the language faced oppression. As we can see from this map, we can see roughly where the languages of Scots in blue and Gaelic in green were spoken the most, and as you can see, English isn't to be found. However, after 1707, from roughly 1750 to 1910, an event known as the clearances happened. It was to what some historians call ethnic cleansing, treating Scottish families as subclass citizens on potential farmland. As we can see from this map, the Highlands, which spoke mostly Gaelic, was hit the hardest, as well as many Scots-speaking areas such as Dumfries and Galloway, Aberdeenshire, and Shetland. The clearances seem to be confused with the Highland clearances, which refers to a specific period in which the Highlands suffered the most violent cleansing during the period. But the fact is, all of Scotland experienced it, and seeing the more rural and working class areas affected the most is no coincidence, as that was where mostly Scots and Gaelic speakers were. This has a term, and it's called linguicide, the attempt to erase in part or in whole a language of a people. We can see that Gaelic and Scots were one of the national languages of Scotland, but now just under 70,000 people speak Gaelic, and just over 1 million speak Scots. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until November 30th, 2025, St. Andrew's Day, where Scots speakers got equal rights to English speakers in school and the work environment, which was passed by the Scottish Parliament earlier that year. Beatings in schools and mental abuse to school children speaking Scots on paper lasted until the 40s, but eyewitnesses and victims say that they recall it happening well into the 80s as well, and the mental abuse still has not stopped in many schools or work environments. For example, up until November 30th, 2025, a Scots speaker was not allowed to go to a job interview speaking Scots. It's a tragedy, and unfortunately, forgotten part of history. Not only that, the Anglo-British imposed Highland famine killed off around 100,000 people in the Highlands, which might sound small, but it was a significant amount of its population at the time, and affected Gaelic and Scots speakers. Evidence of this can be seen in the Highland famine roads or famine walls. The clearances as a whole were brutal. Economic coercion, homes being burned. Estimates suggest that 800,000 Scots in total were evicted through some type of force, such as the burning of homes, and 2 million to 4.6 million Scots had to immigrate abroad through force or economic uncertainty as a result of the so-called Union. I could go on about how brittle the Scots language's history is, but I'm sure you can now understand why so many Scots were furious with what happened to the Wikipedia page at the time, because of the real tragic linguistic discrimination that continues to this day. The damage done by the Wikipedia even got the Scottish government involved to add more Scots pages to their website to help make up for the damage caused by the Wikipedia scandal. So what happened to the American teenager? Well, they released a statement in response to the backlash. They said, I don't mind if you revert all my edits, delete my articles, and ban me from the wiki for good. I've already found out that my contributions have angered countless people, and to me that's all the devastation I can be given. After years of thinking I was doing good, and yes, obsessively editing, I have OCD, I was only a 12-year-old when I started. And sometimes when you start something young, you can't see that the habit you've developed is unhealthy and unhelpful as you grow older. I don't care about defending myself, I only want to stop being harassed on my social medias and to stop my other friends who have nothing to do with the wiki from being harassed as well. Whether peace can bias go wiki being kept like it is or extensively reformed to wipe my influence from it makes no difference to me now that I know I've done no good anyway. Shortly after, he deleted his Twitter and stepped away from his wiki account for a while. He eventually came back, but mostly for genuine corrections and adding imagery. Furthermore, there was a wave of trolls to the Scots Wikipedia doing the same thing simply to be annoying, but as of now the Wikipedia seems to be recovering with genuine Scots speakers making articles and edits. Also, another issue with the Wikipedia was that a lot of admins weren't even Scots speakers. In fact, in the beginning there was only one native Scots speaking admin, being Derek Ross, and another said that they were actively learning the language. This resulted in many Scottish people requesting for the wiki to be deleted entirely. The wiki considered this, but instead they chose to delete and refine all the articles that were not made by fluent Scots speakers and try and make a genuine encyclopedia for Scots speakers. An operation known as the Big Wiki Rewrite was launched by the Scots Language Centre, and volunteers are still actively making quality articles to this day, with almost 50,000 being fluently in Scots in the modern day. This whole situation ties back to xenophobia, or more accurately Scotophobia, in which many unionists like to frame Scotland as unable to govern themselves due to ethnic stereotypes such as penny pinchers, or going back to old discriminatory language, that Scots is just bad English, or the language of the uneducated. In the present day, there are active efforts to preserve the language, including recovering old Scots letters such as the yoch, along with others and including letters that have accents atop. In conclusion, this whole situation shows that language is not just something that is spoken, it can be incredibly sensitive historically and present day. I also want to add at the end, please do not harass anyone. At the end of the day, this was just a 12-year-old doing these changes who was probably very interested in Scotland's culture and didn't realise the historical sensitivities behind Scotland's languages. This has been Alba Rising, Scotland's story in Scotland's words. Subscribe to keep the movement going.